story about drugs in Hawaii. Anything that you can imagine in the late 90s, early 2000s. This is going to tell you about my journey through that. Check this out. And I don't know, not everybody's going to be happy that I'm telling this story. Maybe it should be told. Let's tell you a little bit about myself.
Be blasé about some things, Rose, but not about Titanic.
This is the ship they say is unsinkable.
It is unsinkable. God himself could not sink this ship.
Part 2. So where I left off, I was talking about the first time I had ever made any money off of drugs. So, like I said, the first drugs that I ever sold were ecstasy pills. In the late 90s, early 2000s, if you had ecstasy, you could sell it. It was easy. Everybody wanted it. And the more that people used it, the more that they would take in a night. So their tolerances would build up, and so then they'd take more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And so every time they took a little bit more, that was more money for every one person. So it was so easy that if you had just, a couple dozen people, that relatively quickly you could find yourself selling them 2, 3, 4 times the amount that you were selling them just 3 or 4 weeks earlier. So those couple dozen people turned into 100, and then that would turn into more and more, that you were selling. So it was so easy to make so much money during this time. I found pretty clever ways to hide drugs while it was on me, and it was ridiculous looking back on it. We'd have baggies shoved in our socks, and into the club we would go. And we figured if we ever saw any sign of trouble, we could reach up with our shoe or other foot and just kind of push them out, and then leave it there on the floor and leave, run if we had to. But never happened. We never ever suspected that there was a time that we were in any danger until one time, and I'll get into that later. I very quickly went from selling those first 20 pills to selling a couple thousand a week. And at that point, that's when I needed to find more contacts. And that's where all that networking came into play. All the people that I was meeting in the nightclubs, whether it be DJs or people in the music industry, or other drug dealers, or strippers, or waiters and waitresses. Like I said, there's 5 industries: music, sex, alcohol, drugs, and food. And if you know somebody in any of those, you're gonna know people in each of them. It's just the way it works. So if I was selling 1,000 pills a week, then I was making somewhere close to $15,000 a week at that time. And that was crazy fast money. But it was never enough. I found that if I had the supply, I could sell 5,000, 10,000 pills every single week. And then I found that if I had a network of people helping, and I could just cut a little bit off my cost, I could network this out into a big spider web and make even more money. it got crazy in the first 6 months. The whole time, I'm not saving any money. I am spending money like it was Monopoly and did not care, because I knew at that point it was an unlimited supply of money. That so much so that it didn't matter what I had in my pocket, because I could double it, triple it, quadruple it in one day if I really wanted to. Did other people benefit? Absolutely. All of my friends benefited. I had so much ecstasy that I was taking the powder out of the bottom of the baggies that the ecstasy came in, and I would pour this powder into these mason jars, and it would have all these different colors and all the different pills that were crushed up into this powder, because the ecstasy would bounce against each other and create all this powder. So I'd have all these mason jars full of powder, leftover powder from the ecstasy pills, and I'd have them in my kitchen, just sitting on the counters, and little spoons that you could scoop of it and pour it into a bottle of orange juice or water and shake that up, and then just throughout the night drink that. And it was crazy, basically making ecstasy for weight. I touched on this in the first video. Did I feel guilty at any point during this time frame? And the answer is no. Absolutely not. I didn't. I didn't feel like there were any victims at the time, because everybody I knew was, taking ecstasy. It was probably more uncommon to go to a rave and people not be using ecstasy. So I didn't feel like it was the kind of drug that was ruining families or anything like that, because most of us didn't have families at the time. Most of us was young adults that were, single or dating, and there was nobody getting hurt. And so at the time, I didn't feel any guilt for what I was doing. But again, like I said before, I realize now that I shouldn't have done it, because it was, for one, a stepping stone for me. It started me down that path of justification of why I could do what I did, and why it was okay. And if you could do this, then why can't you do this? It's very, very easy to start down that path, and all it takes is a foot in that door. So another group that really kind of helped me push all this stuff, just constant flow, was a car club. And it was a local young adult car club. I mean, I don't think anybody was much over the age of 24, probably between 20 and 24. And that local car club was very, very big in the nightclub scene, and was helping promote various nightclubs. And it was one of those names that if you heard it, you would go to that event because you knew that they had just this huge group of beautiful people. And I latched on to a couple of those guys pretty quickly, and they helped me network out further. And there were several contacts, in that group that I could work through, and that really helped build, a bigger base and a bigger group of people that always wanted. There were 2 or 3 people in those early days of selling ecstasy that really was there and kind of helped me build this group of people to network through, sell the ecstasy to, and build dealers underneath me to help me sell the ecstasy. And one guy in particular, he was, we were pretty close, and I was, always paying for everything for him, and he was making money, and we were just partying, and we would go to these huge raves and look out for each other as we walk around the raves, and people just, over time, obviously they got to know us really well, and everybody was coming up to us and just buying, and it was just constant money flowing, and we weren't keeping track of anything. I was not keeping track to make sure that all the money was there. I was not counting the money ever. It was just piles of cash, and we would spend it like it didn't matter, because at the time it didn't matter. But what I needed after all of that was I needed to get closer to the source. And see, that's the trick, is wherever you are on this totem pole, you're always trying to get further up, because the closer you got to the top, the more money you were going to make, and the less footwork you had to do. So I needed somebody beyond who I was already getting from. Because $15 a pill profit, that's not bad. But eventually, I would get it down to $2 a pill. And at one point, 50 cents a pill. And they were still selling them for $30. At 10,000 pills a week, you do the math. In the next episode, I'll explain how I went from just a few friends that were able to provide, a few thousand pills a week, to finding a mainland connection, and how that furthered the process into becoming not just a drug dealer in all the nightclubs with ecstasy, but really moving into some of the heavier stuff, and eventually into prison. So please watch the next episode. Thank you.